It's official. The word of the year is uncertainty. At least so declared the New York Times in a headline just this past week. The word of the year is uncertainty. There was no ambiguity about it. What more was there to say? Basically, this headline proclaims in declarative terms an acknowledgement of what you and I already know to be true. All the news that's fit to print, indeed. But in this, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Life is uncertain, infinitely precious and precarious. One moment, things are going along fine, and we may even allow ourselves to believe it will always be so, and then, just like that, change. This, we know, is the enduring constant in our human experience. Uncertainty, change, and then perhaps growth. Within the cycles of our lives, in the course of time, ours is to respond to uncertainty. That's about all we can know for certain. Things will change, and we will be forced to respond. And we do that founded upon our faith. In particular, in spite of the truth of life's certain uncertainties, can we still yet discern and discover a life of covenant and connection, a life of purpose and pleasure, a life of personal and interpersonal growth and maturation, and ultimately, in Hebrew we say, limrot hakol, in spite of all, we can yet discern and discover a life that leaves the world for certain a little bit better than how we found it. As I have considered that New York Times headline declaring uncertainty the word of the year, I reflected on the certainty of life's uncertainties. And as I prepared for this morning with you, I reflected as well upon one of the texts in particular that we shared this morning, the first verses from the book of Ecclesiastes. And I have turned my thoughts to a second text, perhaps one that would not come first to mind, the first words of the book of Deuteronomy. For both Ecclesiastes and Deuteronomy offer us a response to that which so often seems so uncertain and so unpredictable and all so precarious. The first text I have in mind is Ecclesiastes, and it is familiar to you surely. It is assigned to us in the course of the lectionary, the annual reading cycle dictated by the Revised Common Lectionary, the ordained cycle of sacred readings shared at Calvary and throughout Christendom on this Sunday. And the second text I've been thinking about, Deuteronomy, comes to mind because in the Jewish lectionary, in the annual cycle of sacred readings, Jews make their way through the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, sequentially. And just this past week, we concluded the reading of the 4th book, the book of Numbers, and take up this week the opening verses of Deuteronomy. Now, I can already hear the naysayer. What can you tell us that's new, Rabbi? Ecclesiastes, Deuteronomy. These stories are so yesterday, they're ancient. Surely there's nothing new here. It's futile, your efforts. And that naysayer would be in good company. In fact, he or she could perhaps be mistaken for the author of Ecclesiastes itself. For wise King Solomon, who is credited with writing in his youth the book of Proverbs and in middle age the Song of Songs, is in his old age credited with the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. For at the end of his life, Solomon looks back over his experience and with the words with which we began this morning's service declares, in the face of life's verities, vanity of vanities, all is futile. We toil and try to triumph, and we inevitably fail and fall away. Our flesh is for worms, our toil is in vain. In other words, says Solomon, get used to the uncompromising realities you face, and do not resent nor try to resist the repetitive patterns that befall you. What, in T.S. Eliot's words, in his love song to J. Alfred Prufrock, he describes as measuring one's life out in coffee spoons, but rather embrace the fact that the best we can do is to live a life of justice, to live justly, to live a life of faith, to live faithfully, and to grow wise in understanding, the understanding that is to be found in devoting our lives to God and God's ways. And Deuteronomy's response to the uncertainties and vicissitudes of our life, Deuteronomy's response to life's uncertainty, to the repetitive patterns we realize and to the persistent upsets we suffer, to our frustratingly futile efforts to avert our final verdict, Deuteronomy's response is to be found in this fifth of the 5 books of the Torah's title. In Hebrew, the title is Devarim, but in Greek it is Deuteronomy. And those first few syllables, deutero, are suggestive of a doubling, a replication, a copy, a reiteration of laws that Moses has already shared with the people. And in fact, Deuteronomy is an unusual book in this. It contributes very little to the story, but is in fact a retelling or a re-understanding of what had come before. The book of Numbers, which precedes it, does not require Deuteronomy as a coda. And the book of Judges, which follows, knows nothing of Deuteronomy in its narrative. And so, we might say with the naysayer, we've heard all this before. We've seen and been here before. There's nothing new in what you're telling us. And what's the point in that? To which Jewish tradition teaches, though it may appear to you as if your present experience is the same as it ever was, what with life's repetitive patterns replaying themselves again and again, and though it may appear to you as though you have seen this play before and it doesn't end well, the very presence of Deuteronomy in our canon, and all scholars are of ultimately one mind in identifying Deuteronomy as a later addition to the Torah, to the Old Testament, to our biblical canon in general. So it is that while we may in this moment recognize what is going on in our lives as part of a pattern, so must we recognize what we experience and see in our lives opportunity. In Hebrew we say, limrot hakol, in spite of all, in spite of the omnipresence of uncertainty, and in spite of the constancy of change, there ever exists for each and every one of us an opportunity to hold fast to the foundations of our faith, such that we may indeed find meaning and beauty and truth. We may in fact discover purpose and pleasure and personal and interpersonal growth. All this, and too, we may discover the ability we possess to impact for good, to bring into the world blessings, such that for our having passed through this life and having engaged in tikkun olam, the ongoing repair of our world, we might yet discover that we can improve ourselves and the experience of one another, and that these gifts, in spite of all that is uncertain, are constantly and ever available to us, and of that, this year, this day, and always, we can ever be certain. Amen.